Okay, so I'm going to attempt to finish up this 200 something books I read in this 2024. And if yeah, I'm having some trouble here because I'm actually charging my phone because it's been so I have the charger there. So anyway, so I might not be able to put it down. But I will make do. Um, so after I think I just finished up in June. I'm sorry, uh, May, I think, and then I was just about to start on June. Um, so in June, I read This Census Taker by China Mieville. I think it's China Mieville. I heard him kind of being kind of in a little bit similar, not quite directly like like adjacent, but something just kind of like maybe tangentially related to weird fiction, but I'm not too sure. I did hear he actually had a new book out that was on my wish that I was looking to read. I think it was co-authored by Keanu Reeves of all people. Not to say that I'm not really, expect him to. I do know that he had some, that's probably a long time coming. Maybe I'm not sure, but yeah, I will try to read a little bit more of his stuff. I thought his stuff was like a little bit, um, like the census taker is like I think from the I don't know if I did a review for that, but it's from the point of view, or it's like including a young man who's like, and then there's a, I guess his relationship with this census taker character who's an older, who's in this kind of weird, um, somewhat dystopian district of theirs. A lot of stuff takes place in kind of alternate timelines of stuff, which is probably what drew me into an interest in his stuff. And then second, I read Pafko on the At the Wall by Don DeLillo, and that was very baseball themed, and I didn't really get a good percentage of it, but I thought it was really how Don DeLillo kind of um, has multiple different like narratives spliced together going on at the same time, the way he describes that in like this very short story that's pretty was like less than an hour, I think, and he hits all those kind of things of like like a missile crises that Thomas Pynchon and all that, and then all that stuff happening kind of around the time of the Cold War, at the height of the Cold War, I guess. It's kind of a satire take on that, mixed with kind of the very pinnacle of sports going on at the baseball game. Eileen by Otessa Mesfeg. I don't want to be too I thought too critical, but I'm not sure if I'm much of a fan of Mesfeg just yet. I will have to read her other one. She had another novel recently that she published, and I think maybe this year sometime. And all I know is that it has a lamb. The cover of it has a lamb on it. I'm just like at a loss for words, but I might read that. But I'm not like a huge fan of My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I thought it was a little bit too. And I'm no thin sky. I'm not like, well, I'm not. It's not like I have. I do go for the darker books. But I thought that that one was like a little bit too like like the narrator, and that was just so unlikable in my estimation. Like it just like completely just like I don't know. I just didn't, and that's some of the point. It's meant to be like a polarizing kind of take on this character sketch of somebody who's just totally committed to cutting everything else in her life and just going in for. I think I read that later on, not too long after that, I think. But I thought there was some definitely funny parts, some definitely dry, but it is so dry that it almost seems like that's all. Like there's nothing more going on, I don't think, even though like maybe there is. And then after that I did Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, which was obviously a classic that I had neglected reading for all these years. Plus I heard that technically I think I visited kind of near, or maybe I did go to the place where in Iceland. It's been like almost a decade since I went. I think it was 2016 in summer, and obviously it's cold, kind of semi-cold, chilly, year round. It's like a kind of perennial jacket weather, which is nice. It's nice if you're fine with like little to no trees and vegetation. But yeah, basically I think that in the Jules Verne rock where the setting of the novel where it takes place is located in Iceland. I think like in the northern most part. I think I could be totally wrong. It could be near to Reykjavik. I'm not sure. But yeah. On photography by Susan Sontag. One of my favorites by her. I really loved how, even though that's like kind of the top pick of a lot of people do, it's almost like, okay, we get that, she has a lot to say about it, but like how she talks about like on Plato's Cave and incorporates that in. And I think I liked it so much that I actually did do a review of it. So I probably shouldn't really talk about it anymore. You can just watch my review. Okay, so White Teeth Zadie Smith. I did this one too. Zadie Smith is becoming a slow favorite of mine. She's kind of on my radar again because I had kind of a phase where I was like, okay, well, one after the other, and I'm gonna read. Hopefully, I think it's the Autograph Man. Yeah, that was one of her. I think that was not her first. Her first was actually with White Teeth. I'm sorry. But yeah, that was a pretty kind of, what is it, meta-modern, kind of post-modern, but like not quite, because she's drawing from a lot of different sources too. So she's an English writer, but she also has the Jamaican ancestry, ties into that, and a lot of her other different stuff. But more on her later. The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy. That wasn't there was a trilogy of stuff that he did with the character of Billy Parm, I think. It's P-H, R-A, wait, no, I think it's P-H-R-A-R-M, or something like that, so it's Billy something Parm, and so he's like, but yeah, that, I can't remember, there's somebody had something called the Border Trilogy, and then there's Invitation to a Beheading by Nabokov, which I loved and adored it for, even though it was really kind of bleak into the point. It's like it kind of like kept putting off the execution so long. Spoiler alert, obviously there's an execution going on. The main character of the novel is tried for Gnostic turpitude, and he's they want to get rid of him. All the Soviet kind of regime in the 30s when this takes place. But yeah, so The Sickness is, The Sickness, okay, Stephen R. King. So this is interesting because I was looking for something that wasn't, because I was kind of getting in deep with this kind of commitment I was making, reading books this year, and I didn't. All I know is that Stephen King, the contentious kind of, a lot of people kind of like throw him out. I know David Foster Wallace, like, I think, says he's not, like, he had beef with him, not like actual in person, just in that I know of at least, but like he considered him kind of a hack in some ways, of just kind of using the same tricks and stuff, and I'm not sure what to think of that, because I was trying to read a little bit, and I've had The Stand, sitting on my wish list on Amazon for like a while now, and, just like it as well, like, I kind of grew up with that kind of horror, the original, the 1990 Stephen King, wow, I can't talk, miniseries called It, not the movie, but the one with Tim Curry, obviously, not Tim Curry, Stephen Curry, sorry, but yeah, that, him as Pennywise was just like, very, this like, so, man, it still is like very, just like eerie, and like hits like all the like right spots of like, because I know the whole, clown, the scary clown of, or like, the harkening back to John Wayne Gacy Jr., like that whole aspect of the phenomenon of, scary clowns and stuff like that, or creepypastas being regenerated over and over, is a very tiresome thing, I think, but like, I think that still, even considering that, I think like, it holds up really well. But anyway, so this was a different Stephen R. King, because, just to caution that, it was Stephen, not just this other guy who does horror, and I don't know, it was just like, okay, it was just like an interesting kind of, I don't know, the short, kind of few hours long short story, and it was like, it wasn't going for like the gutsy or like the grotesque, like it really kind of gory stuff, like murders and like and like stuff like Friday the 13th kind of. I think that Day of Horrors, like all that, the Dawn of the Dead stuff, like or the George Romero films and stuff. That age is kind of bygone now. I think zombie stuff, zombie apocalypse stuff is so zombie stuff or vampires, anything to do with the two. It's like completely every kind of satirical iteration of that has also, whether it's like Shaun of the Dead, which I thought was funny. I kind of grew up with that too, and Edgar Wright, like all, but I think like the satirical, it's run its stuff too. So it's like even like was Zombieland, I think, right, with Jesse Eisenberg, but yeah, so I think like this Stephen R. King did a pretty decent job, but I don't know if it's something people seem to having flack with the way he markets himself as a short story writer. Some people think he's riding off the coattails of Stephen King, but I'm not sure. I don't know if it is his real name. I feel bad that he's thrown in or lumped into that, because it's like you're always just gonna be, especially if you're doing anything to do with like the horror genre, like you're gonna get a lot of. It's hard to get traction, or if like the traction you do get is gonna be seen as like insincere, I guess. So, as a marketing ploy. So, The Flowers of Buffoonery by Osamu Dase. Another kind of new favorite of mine that I fell in love with, was it 2 years ago, I think, when I read not Confessions of a Mask, No Longer Human. That's also kind of got like slowly into the pop culture, which is fine, because I think, it doesn't seem to be in a kind of brain dead kind of, kind of literally me story, like it's actually has the character of that's like very like scarily kind of nice. But like The Flowers of Buffoonery, I think I did a review on it too, because it resonated with me so much. But it was like lighter, that the tone was lighter, more upbeat, even though, because it's, about buffoons, it's like about a bunch of people playing the fools, and, gestures, like in kind of using that as kind of a crutch to hide and to keep at bay these other, like really, like that's what kind of No Longer Human spawns from, kind of almost the same, I think it's, what is it? Oboe, or something, Oboe, I think is the name of the main character. Like that character kind of, he's like has a, different kind of lenses into his psyche. How it is, Samuel Beckett. Again, I'm trying to get more into reading stuff. I still have, what is it? Molloy. Yeah, I think there's another one called something Molloy. Yeah. But it's like usually a lot of people read it like in read those three. There's like 2 or 3 of Samuel Beckett's books that get a lot of that are read kind of in close succession of one another, and I think it's Molloy and then Mother something, or sorry, but it's something like that. But yeah, a Confederate general from the Big Sur, Richard Brautigan. Again, Richard Brautigan's started, I think, like almost 2 years ago, I think, with trout fishing in America. I thought it was really funny. Really kind of satirical, kind of absurd, kind of almost dadaist kind of nonsense. And then after that was Point Omega, Don DeLillo, and I wasn't so sure if I remember what exactly is going on. There's just like a lot of different books I was reading, but yeah, I was trying to read kind of a cluster of each author that I'm trying to get, without necessarily reading their whole thing, but just reading like a first, like at least like a little. I'm not sure if I said that in the first half or the first part of this video, but I think like one way I like to get into knowing whether I like a certain author or not is like, rather than just reading their huge like tomes, like these like 20-30 hour things, like I'd rather just read like a little, Point Omega was like maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, and yeah, so that was like, I just would rather do that rather than start with The Underworld, which I've yet to read, because but I will this year sometime, I hope. And then the Great American Novel, William Carlos Williams. I heard him lauded as almost as a prelude to the Beats in a way, or like a lot of beat poets, I think, with Ginsberg and Kerouac, kind of Burroughs too, I think. A lot of people lauding him with for good reasons, and I think like the Great American Novel had a interesting kind of set of different prose and poetry that kind of had an interesting take on American literature, and like the that what is it Mark Twain, and is kind of propped up to be, when and not saying that's like without any merit either, but it's like the things that are very almost picture or idyllic ideal American literature, like Great American Novel, like that is like it's going to be Herman Melville's Moby Dick, that's going to be the number one, and then it's going to be something maybe by Mark Twain with Samuel Clemens, and I think like that, like he was like kind of commenting on that in an insightful way. So Blue Octave Notebooks by Franz Kafka, that was actually done during his more upbeat, one of his moments of healing. That was actually when I read A Cage Went in Search of Its Bird, which is taken directly from the Blue Octave Notebooks, and that is the one that I reviewed here not too long ago, late last year sometime, and I just loved it. I'm a sucker for Kafka. Anything Kafka-esque, anything that's come up in literature or film or anything, I'm just instantly on it. Which would make you think would make perfect sense that that I would have watched. This is just a dig at myself, but the Orson Welles trial, like with what's his face in it? I'm not sure, but like the 1964 one with and then there's another one with Kyle MacLachlan by, I believe, was it Soderbergh? No, Soderbergh did one on Kafka that was just called Kafka, I think, and that one was, yeah, I've not seen any of these more biopic kind of things or anything yet, but I have seen Kafka-esque movies and stuff, like Charlie Kaufman stuff, obviously, who contributed to the short story collection of these, but I think it was 10 different authors, I think. So, yeah, the Blue Octave Notebooks, you have a lot of different, I'd like to do a review on this sometime, but it's more of a period of Kafka's life that wasn't as depressing and morbid as one might think. Like he was actually in a healthy kind of state of like between, I think it was his 38th or 37th year, I think. So, this would have been maybe almost like at the end of the 1910, like almost reaching into the Roaring Twenties, I guess. Maybe not for the Roaring Twenties, for Czech kind of Republic, kind of not Slovak, but Polish, but German-speaking kind of Bohemians. But for the rest of the world, I think, fortunately. But yeah, he was like, he had to live with his, kind of in the same, Kafka had to live in the same kind of household with his, not the household, but the apartment building that was directly parallel or, downstream from his father. Like it was like his father and his mother lived in the same house. I guess they leased, maybe he owned it, maybe. And he had his private room, but it was always had to answer to his father, like at work and in his private life. It was just like, so A Cage Went in Search of Its Bird is this idea of you are free, except you're not, I guess. And that's kind of my milquetoast take on it, because I couldn't think of any better way of putting it. But it's, and my idea is like, you are free, like, think about how free you consider yourself, like in an existential sense. The biggest, if you're like seeing this from, Sartrean, or even Camus, look at this, although Camus is probably a little bit more melancholic and kind of a little bit more on Kafka's side, I guess, but this idea that technically you can go wherever you want in the grand scheme of things. You can travel the world, but at the same time, there's this looming, ever-lingering, like permanent, aspect of yourself underpinning everything you do, that keeps you home, that keeps you in a place where you're caged, basically, where you're. So Kafka felt like that when he wrote that down, I guess. Like, I'm not trying to, wax my own thoughts on it, but that's kind of what I um, garner from it. This idea that, like, you're, um, like, he's stuck in the same place he was born in, pretty much, like in the same general kind of territory of the Bohemian kind of kingdom, like it was kind of falling, and he was, like, stuck at this turn of the century, and there's a lot of themes of guilt, too, like guilt for not being a good enough son, or guilt for being too good of a son, and, and having a father that was just, belittling and crude and inhumane and abusive, which all of those things were Herman Kafka's was, his father, FYI. And his mother would just kind of agreeably kind of, in kind of a certain state of awe of her husband, would just kind of let him treat her own son like that. And that was kind of part and parcel. And, like, it's this act of, and then there's the existential aspect of, the fact that Kafka suffered terribly seems to be an interest, that seems to be, had he not suffered in that way, would we get any of the complete, what's the word? The potent, such candid, terrifying, but also equally heartwarming and human and just complex, like, out of this world, completely, profound storytelling, or, all those stories. And I don't think we would, but that's not to say that just because, that doesn't necessarily mean that he deserved any of that treatment. It just puts it in, like, a new perspective, I guess. So after that, I read Elbow Room by Daniel Dennett, and that was an interesting kind of take on, I guess he had talked about, like, Sam Harris, different guests too, like this Sphinx, the wasp. This idea that wasps are, on his idea of that free will, he was trying to say that he was trying to, with compatibilism, compatibilism is basically a mixture, kind of a melding of the two schools of thought of free will, and which are such broad berths in and of themselves, but free will and determinism. And he was trying to kind of give Elbow, I believe, to leeway for both of those kind of to play into one another and to dovetail rather than to be at odds. And I think that's where Sam Harris comes in. He's like a lot of the stuff he's, like, describing is, like, observing, like, the underworkings. I can't remember who said this, but the underworkings of, like, a car, but, like, you don't actually need to know those in order to drive the car. It's just like, okay, well, we don't have free will. And that pamphlet I read, like, 6 or 7 years back now, it's like, I want to say it was like 21 or 22 when first kind of got into his stuff. Yeah. But I think with that, it was, like, an interesting kind of take on, like, the Schopenhauerian kind of thought of man can do anything he wants, but he can't will what he wills, will what he wants to do. So there's, like, a difference between a will and then the pure, like, the kind of illusion that we have desire, I guess, that desire is, like, the machinery or the things that are driving us. That's, like, the tick-tocking, and that you can say out of spite, but, like, even you saying that out of spite. But I think, like, and this is where, not Scott, what's his name? Sean O'Carroll. Sean Carroll? Or is it Sean O'Carroll? I think it's Sean O'Carroll. He was a theoretical physicist, but he also he was educated in the humanities too, and he did a thing about free will and the Laplace's demon too, Simon Laplace, the famous kind of, or rather infamous demon argument of the never-ending goal to be somewhat comfortable. But that idea that, like, these there's these things driving us, and, like, this, I think that fits into the Laplace demon, because Laplace was imagining something, and I'm gonna totally screw this up, but he was imagining something that, as in Laplace, a entity that propels everything into motion, that was like a hypothetical, obviously, kind of thought experiment of like, what if there was this, completely all powerful, all omniscient, all knowing, and he was propelling everything into motion, everything immersion, every emergent property came into being from this thing, and he knew everything to do with quantum physics, every ounce of quantum mechanics. Like, you wouldn't, like, would anything, because of that, like everything that, like, even the stuff that we haven't, science hasn't gleaned yet. And I think that like, if you gave an instruction manual to, like, they would know every single thing. Like, it's just already, it's like basically more like a god, I think, is like some people were, later critics would have kind of said of that, and there's also maybe some contention to do with the original kind of translation of demon. Like, what did he mean by demon? Did he mean something kind of innately kind of inextricably, like, insidious, like that meant ill? Or did he just mean something just outside of our knowledge and stuff? Because in that sense, like, that just means, like, oh, just all knowing, and then, and the gnosis, I guess, also plays into that. But anyway, that's just my kind of scrambled thoughts. So yeah, Elbow Room, like, I like how he kind of pays homage to all these different philosophers, like Nietzsche, and his view on kind of free will and all these other ones. And I don't know if he mentioned Karl Popper's falsification thing. I still want to read that, but I think he also mentioned all the different kind of continental philosophers and stuff. Maybe Thomas Nagel in there too. But yeah, and then after that was The World of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig. Very, very depressing. I did a review on that, and I'm just gonna keep this short because you can look at my review. But yeah, it was just depressing that but maybe not, because Zweig did live a pretty happily long life, and he's like trying to say that him and his, he was surrounded himself with a milieu of, he was lucky enough to have a milieu of all these like-minded individuals who all had like this thirst for, or like artistic, and to write, and really push the boundaries, I guess. And it wasn't just in writing; it was also he mentions like the August Rodin. He mentions like watching him sculpt, and like how getting kind of in his head a little bit, like he was like lucky enough to see him, and he was just talking about how lucky he was to meet all these different up and coming artists and stuff, not just in Austria, like with Rilke. But yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I thought it was really interesting. If on a winter's night, a traveler. This was Italo Calvino. I'd like to read more of his stuff, definitely. I think I read only three works, but I definitely like to work my way through his bibliography. So throughout my life, just like I went to pre-soul thing throughout my life. So I'm getting there. I'm about halfway through In Search of Lost Time. Okay. To have or to have or to be by Eric Fromm. I think I've reviewed this as well, like a short little thing, because yeah, he was a interesting kind of combination between psychology and humanity, like the ethics of humanity, not just, but like he also went, I think, pretty deep into like kind of the Zen aspect of it too. Some of his stuff, the more psychological stuff, reminded me of Viktor Frankl's kind of idea of, looking at someone and, not as like a means to an end, and but using kind of his logotherapy to kind of shape and how to address the existential needs of the person. In like like one of his patients said that he was like very depressed, and he was like an engineer, mathematician, and then but after having cancer and then going to Frankel for some post kind of cancer, after having it, I think the tumor, I think like when regression, I think, and then he was talking about how he was like in therapy with Frankel, and how just kind of like giving him a challenge of like, you have stuff to live for, like give yourself at least one thing to live for. And then he gave himself like his his family and his his wife and family, and and then began like painting, I think, or doing something artistic, and then he thrived at that, and then got really really good at like writing stuff down or painting and doing whatever. Music, I think too. Maybe that was what he did. But it doesn't make a difference because it's all kind of the same kind of Platonic kind of Jungian kind of idea of art. But anyway, so. After that was the. I think I wait. Hold up. The heartbreaking work of a staggering genius by Dave Eggers. I'm working my way through his stuff too. I'm not gonna be super fanatic about it. I'm just gonna kind of slowly like, oh well, let's see what this, what the circle's like, I guess, or let's see what what was his other stuff? I think he co-wrote the screenplay to the Where the Wild Things Are. So yeah, with it was Spike Jonze film. So yeah, it was one of those things. But I'd like to watch one of these days. My Year of Rest and Satisfaction, Ottessa Moshfegh. I think I did a little thing. Or no, I didn't do a thing on it. But I wasn't too big on it. I thought the character was kind of bland, a little bit too dry. That being said, I didn't totally unlike it. I did, just why I'm bad at scoring books. But, if I, probably, maybe, I don't know, at least 5 out of 10, which is pretty, decent, I guess. I'm not gonna try to, surmise why exactly. It was just more of a instinct level thing. But, I don't know. It was just hard. I found it hard to like kind of root for the character, I guess, is the biggest thing. Even though by the end, like she did, like learn kind of from her mistake of kind of trying to sleep life away and just totally kind of shut everybody out. Even if she was kind of saving herself a lot of trouble, like her best friend character in that, it was like got herself kind of wrapped up in all these different kind of traumatic affairs and stuff, and she's like kind of overkill the other way. But anyway, I thought it was like I just thought some of it was trying too hard to be edgy, and I also felt like it being set in the 90s didn't really play into it. I thought that was just kind of like it could have been set. I guess the setting can make the play, the whole of the thing. If like you set this in the 19th century, you're obviously gonna have to talk about the rampant illnesses and terminal kind of tuberculosis or stuff like that. But yeah. So and then after that was a Radical Chick and the Mao. This is Tom Wolfe. So he was a writer, novelist, and journalist. He was a journalist who wrote the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. I have not read that. I've only did one Tom Wolfe book, but in that book he talks about all these different. I think he mentions. I think he even mentions why am I back? Hunter S. Thompson. In that, starting out like these other different. He mentions. I think. These beat poets too, like he mentioned that kind of the phenomenon of a rising cultural era of like beat poetry in the jazz and the clubs and all that stuff coming up, and the kind of travel heavy, kind of road heavy stuff, like a lot of people going on the road, like Kerouac did, and in kind of following them around, and I think that sounds pretty interesting, so I'm going to check that out. So on that was on Dialogue by David Bohm. I heard a lot of people, Thich Nhat Hanh, as maybe unsurprisingly actually, talked about how the implicate order of the universe, I think, like I'm gonna not get this anywhere near close to being right, but it's like the implicate and the explicate order, I think, are the two, and they're not necessarily contradicting, I don't know, but I think they're just two different modes of thinking. I think like that in David Bohm's was like kind of his theories, because he was a theoretical physicist and went through the whole roster of mathematics and stuff. Probably quantum physics too, mechanics and whatnot. So he probably had to contend with that very heavy mathematical left brain kind of thinking stuff. I say that in a very Ian McGilchrist way of left brain kind of way, not to necessarily radically say that one side is like there's not to say that that binary way of left and right, but because there's all sorts of different traits that kind of explore human emotions and traits and features of consciousness. But yeah, so David Bohm talks about that. The implicate order of the universe, something being kind of there's implied, I guess. Like this, it's something that you can't point out. Obviously you can't just say like, okay, this is it's something that's like there's an order to everything. But there's also entropy too, so I guess. But I can't quite remember. But he was talking about like Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. They're falling out, and how this idea of like dialogue, and this is pretty short book he kind of talked about in kind of essay form about how these friendships and kind of get kicked to the curb in favor of kind of a prideful kind of dogmatic view of the sciences. Like you have to, and I'm not sure that's exactly what Einstein was doing, because but it was like they, instead of, rather than having a dialogue about it, they ended up having, I know that word's thrown around a lot, dialogue, but like they decided that to kind of hold to this prideful way of looking at science and saying like, well, this theory of, I think it was relativity, I think that they disagreed on. Their qualms, I think, were possibly, I don't know. It was more, they transcended. It wasn't just a personal thing. It was like they actually felt like it was a kind of a scientific kind of like almost a dishonor to science, I guess, that they had these opposing views. So, but they took it to the grave, I think. So they never actually reconciled that particular point. So after that, I read Difficult Loves by Italo Calvino as well. It's a series of different short stories. I thought it was more kind of a little bit more kind of romantic without the tongue-in-cheek aspect of If on a Winter's Night. And after that, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, I've already reviewed, and yeah, Milana Kundera, but I just finished The Joke too. Literally just a few hours ago. I just read the last handful of pages, and I was just like, I was just very hard to get through. I don't know why. Unbearable Lightness, I read that, but but I also read The Joke as well, and it's just it's so hard. Maybe I need to listen, I guess. Maybe it's the same thing with George Saunders, Lincoln and the Bardo. It's just one of those things where maybe listening to it with all the different cast of characters, but because The Joke has it's told from. I'll try to do a review when I feel up for it. Same goes for a lot of my reviews, but even what books I love. I love Dostoevsky. He's one of my favorite writer, I think, at least in the top 2 or 3 maybe. And I just love, as much as I adore The Brothers Karamazov or The Idiot, my favorite books pretty much by him in general, but I don't want to rush into it. I want to make sure I'm at least seems to be in the right mindset. I say as I'm mumbling through this, because I feel kind of, I don't know, just tired, I guess. There's nothing more there's no more psychoanalyzing to add to that. Just tired, pretty much. I don't know. So on Radical, okay, so I did The Unbearable Lightness, and yeah, that was, I don't know. I just some books, maybe it was just because it was Kundera's first book, I think, The Joke. It was told from these 4 different kind of things, and it was hard for me to identify with the subject matter of the Czech kind of Gestapo, almost Gestapo kind of police, the secret police, and all these different Communist Party affiliations, stuff that Kundera had to, all these red tape to navigate through. I think that was just hard to get to the core of doing, and I think in a similar way that what's his name, Mother by Maxim Gorky, the Soviet writer, like the way he incorporates so much communism and socialism, and he's like trying to make it's like we all had, and then the mother, like the great archetypal mother of the Russian mother, the doting mother, the one that gives bread, and like it was everything was a motif that the characters in themselves actually didn't have much substance. They only served as a kind of a stand-in for a vehicle of some socialist grand ideal of not a hierarchy of or maybe of just a kind of a plebeian society that's trying to of workers, and it's like you understand that once you see the abject kind of miserable poverty that a lot of people had to deal with, and like the change and the stuff like that. But like the way, and it's not even that I necessarily am saying that socialism is bad. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying that in controlled kind of states where it's not easy to be taken over by somebody else, and yeah, I think it's you have to make sure that the people at heart are like their intentions are good, and that's very, very hard, because then you have to kind of like think locally in a sense to actually globally, I guess, instead of just being like, oh, we have to rush into the violence, like the whole like Luigi Mangione stuff, like obviously it's old news at this point, but I think it's just like a little bit like people are like, whoa, violence breeds violence. It's just something that people say that of countries that are it's like our country is founded on violence. It's like, yes, that doesn't mean that it's like an ought is fallacy. Just because it is founded, like it doesn't mean we can't change. I'm just not, and I'm not even saying. I'm just saying that it's just like I don't know. I don't want to get too political in this thing because I'm not even sure what I'll believe tomorrow or 2 hours from now. Who knows? I try not to try to keep the feed down on a notch. But yeah, the whole like Mangione thing is just like I totally understand his frustration, like the back issues, the lack of incremental stuff, of like how to like getting through to like this kind of this is why Kafka is so important to me, is like the total kind of inexplicable, like impossible, like way of communicating with the higher powers. I think anything, not higher powers deified, but just in like in the castle, for example, like K, the slipping into anonymity, he's just like his cataloging of him going to and from the castle, like him trying to get to this village and like trying to communicate. Nobody's like, I get that it's like the gradations and the incremental lobbying that you think might get, even if you do like the most facetious, I'm sure not facetious, but the most sycophantic, servile lobbying you can imagine, it's still not going to really do anything. And it's easy to just be like, oh, well, but the government just sucks. Like, the government, it's like, yes, we get it. And it's like, we should just bring back assassinations. It's just like, you don't understand that people are going to take that, and, some people will take that seriously, like, horribly seriously. And then before you know it, like, you might just have total anarchy. And it's just like, the anarchy might be good if our nation wasn't so damn, like, disparate. Like, it's just, if our like United States wasn't so disunited, if it wasn't like the South, for example, is like you cross the Mason-Dixon line, literally just a couple hours from me, and it's just like a totally different world in West Virginia. Like, you don't know what saying that kind of stuff is gonna, what kind of repercussions if you just say eat the rich and just kill these people, like, because it's like you might say that with a kind of like just kind of gritty, just say edgy stuff, and it's just like, and a lot of these people too, it's like, no offense to, this is just me waxing again, but it's just like, but hey, nobody's gonna make this far into it anyway. But a lot of these people are people that aren't really justified. Not to say that people, just because you don't go to a Ivy League school or you don't go to a political college and get a law degree that you have any right to say anything about politics. Obviously, that's not true. I mean, obviously, like, like, look at the president right now. He's, like, the most unqualified person ever. But then again, at the same time, there's these people that are more so, like, on the side of the arts or whatever, like musicians or people like that, or like Boy Genius or whatever, the supergroup who are like some of their stuff, Phoebe Bridgers stuff or whatever. But I think it's more like, I can remember a couple of the different members of that were like saying like we should bring, or calling out people, and like some of them were rightly called out, like Obama should have been held to some standard with his drone, just like drone allowing for that to happen, really showing that he wasn't all that different from the super warmongering conservatives. Like it's just kind of, he put on a nice kind of intelligent kind of humanistic face, and then but also when it came down to like push came to shove, he was like, like, you're in charge of this thing, and like sending out drones and stuff, which I remember being confused about back 2011 or so, like 2013, just like this idea that a president like that's supposed to be kind of, seems to be more, definitely less bloodlust, like no bloodlust. I doesn't really, but I think it's true. I think it's more so through the existing kind of hierarchy of impossible to get to things. You have to kind of do these things and like, well, I'm just going to do this thing and kind of kowtow to the elite kind of, oh, sorry, not the elites, I hate that word. But they do exist, I guess so, in some sphere. And yeah, but I think it's just the main thing. So yeah, but I think the thing with like people calling out like Ethel Cain, for example, I'm still trying to figure out what my whole idea of this is too. But like, I think like people like, her calling out, like saying like we should bring back assassinations. It's like, it's just like, it's a little bit too like over the top kind of extreme, on the other end of just like, okay, we get it. You're not saying like literally we should go in the streets and start kind of like, like bringing back, shooting CEOs and stuff like that. And, but anyway, I just don't think that's, it's just I think people are just really impatient, and that change is just like a slow slogging, drudging thing. And it's like, and when I see it from a point of view of like, well, my point of view, it's like, I don't really see how my actions are gonna, I don't have a platform where people, if I say, like, I think, people like her, or like these musicians saying like, oh, to bring up assassinations, it's like, well, he's missing to be edgy and stuff. It's like, no, you have a legitimate platform, millions, like at least a handful of millions people are hearing you, and I think people should just be more, and I think she might have said she was on the spectrum too, so there's that too. It's like a thing with lag, with like it is with Elon Musk, where it's like, was Elon Musk, is he just autistic, or is he doing this like he's just legitimately trying to get on people's nerves with stuff, where he's like, obviously Elon Musk is totally different, race of whatever he is. Dogecoin. Man, wow, what a charismatic, like a ball of charisma, just a Elon, man. Anyway, but yeah, he's but the whole, like, going back to the warmongering kind of suspicious kind of thing, where it's like, and it's like a thing with like him in like he seems to be playing like, and this is what I'm trying to write about kind of in my never-ending novel thing here, is like a character kind of like based off of him in a way, is like kind of almost as like in almost kind of in a indistinguishable from him in another way. So I think like this idea that Elon Musk is like he's just a nerdy, awkward guy on the spectrum who loves rockets. He just wants to make rockets, guys. Come on, just make it. But on the other hand, literally the most like I try to use that word sparingly, literally. But he's one of the most like affluent, richest, well-off people ever. He has like what, 400 billion, I guess, a billion, like billionaires that are already in the elites. He's already 400 times that amount. So I'm just thinking like, it's just like I think there's a part of him that's not as dumb. I'm sorry, not dumb, but I think he's playing dumb in a way. The whole dark maga, him jumping up and down being like a complete tool bag. like him doing that, he's like playing both sides, I guess. He's playing one side of like a conniving, behind the scenes, pushing and shoving, working to get, something to do with the UN or something, or something to do with, whatever the, what's the name of the South American dictator guy that's, or Javier guy, Javier or something, whatever, I can't remember. Who it's easy to kind of like harp on him because he just looks like villainous, or he just looks like a corrupt guy. But that's besides the point. He's probably had more than his fair share of people hatred, but it's just like him, like Elon Musk. It's like, why would he be like siding or like giving money to this Javier guy? It's just like this guy, like, why? He's like, where's his interest at? He's just, I don't know. I'm just saying, maybe you should think about that, or maybe I should. I don't know. I'm not saying anything concrete at all. Except that Elon Musk is weird and you shouldn't listen to him. But that's another thing that's I shouldn't be talking about. Anyway, so I was talking about okay, so after I read The Unbearable Lightness, I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. I think she's a tad overrated, no offense. I just think, now that I'm already in the kind of ranty, kind of tirade, whining phase of my reviews, I'm just gonna say that I think her stuff is a little bit kind of a Tumblr-ish thing where there's not really a lot of substance to the characters. Like, there doesn't really seem like a lot of them are just kind of like reflections of the mumbling Irish kind of mumblecore kind of movies. If all of them were set in Ireland and everybody goes to Trinity College, it's a pretty college. I've seen it. And everybody's, I don't know, just so, the characters are either so bland that I feel like my head is falling out. I'm just like, what is it? And then it's just like, I do understand that there's parts of it that I do like, is the aspect of blossoming outside of high school, like high school not being this prison, like where your popularity contest that lasts forever, like where you're just like, where you're riding off the coattails of that, high school kind of success in South America kind of idealism, but you're kind of moving on from that, and it's possible for you to become your own person, I guess, for lack of a better word. I do agree with that. I do stand by that part of the novel, which is probably a big part. But overall, I just thought the process of going through that book was just drab. And it's meant to be dry, unapologetically dry. But I didn't really, I don't know, I couldn't relate to the whole. It seemed to be getting at a really specific thing. Like, I didn't go to, like, an actual high school. I went to homeschool. I didn't but then a lot of the stuff where it's, like, like, the character of Marianne, for example, like, she's just, like, seems to be, and I recently, or maybe just finished, like, maybe a few months ago, the miniseries that came out, like, 2020 or so, I just thought that was, like, a little bit, like, the idea that, like, her abuse of kind of, her brother in the novel was, like, clear-cut, and it's just, like, and her mother was kind of, like, didn't really do anything about that. It's just, like, really shitty, kind of, like, it's just, like, I'm starting to think about novels that, or storylines, or anything where it's, like, and every show is kind of guilty of doing this. Like, You does this too with, Penn Badgley, the Joe Goldberg thing is just like, which I just literally finished like a few weeks ago, and it's just like, I couldn't stop watching it, even though it's kind of fluff in a lot of ways. But I felt like it's just like the characters of, like, I'm going to write a character that's going to get, abused systematically for 15 years until they're, or until they turn 18, and it's just like, they're just going to get molested, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting into this, but, like, I'm just saying in a hypothetical thing, it's just like, yes, or, like, and then the rest of the novel is going to be writing about, or, creating a character arc of no arc, a flat arc, of them, or maybe something, but that's why I don't like A Little Life, that's why I have so many problems with that book, is because it's like, again, it's like put it in, plotted, people are like, oh my gosh, A Little Life, oh my gosh, I just, like, and it's like, whatever, I mean, I'm not trying to hate on it too much, I mean, I just think that the there was some like good. It was the writing. It was like it was well written. I'll give it that. You know, it was like it was like thoroughly kind of made not bad as far as the quality of the writing, I guess, but the storytelling and the character kind of I guess like the lack of character thereof, I think, was more my issue with it. I think like the main thing is like it's just like a lot of novels that I just have problems with are ones that are like don't they don't have to be super experimental. Like I'm fine. One of my favorite authors wrote about real things. Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Hesse. Maybe less so Hesse, but um, Virginia Woolf too. Modern, like she just like talks about in a very very experimental way through a lens of like Orlando, for example, like about like a woman, but or I'm sorry, a man, born into kind of into this a androgynous, very kind of looking like both sexes, and like it's like kind of takes place in a kind of eclipsed across timelines, centuries. I'm not sure if I reviewed this, but I definitely want to some of these days. I see a lot of I have a lot on my plate already. But I think the main thing with Orlando was like there was an arc, like there's like even though it was kind of a flat arc where she stayed, truly themselves. I guess I was like to refer to them as that, but I think yeah, Virginia Woolf has a very, and I just finished her writer's diary, which is like very eye opening because I thought like it gave us like an image of in kind of a simple, unadorned look into her life, and a lot of it was like interesting. I'm not trying to say anything negative, but like she was like a lot of it came there was like doubts about herself and like doubts about her ability as a writer. I think like she was like, I don't know if I'm even gonna publish this book. Like she would be talking about like maybe her first novel, The Voyage Out, I think, and then I think she and then it was like I think she was talking about Lady Chatterley's Love, or no, sorry, not I'm sorry, Mrs. Dalloway, sorry, um both modernist novels. But yeah, she was talking about releasing that and how like petrified she felt about saying or do like maybe it wasn't good enough or that she might need to do another draft of it over again and then like completely do away with the first or like not or just do away with the idea altogether. So I just thought it was refreshing in a way. Not because it's like a Freudian, a Schadenfreude kind of way of looking at other people's misery, but just more like, oh, well, they had doubts and stuff about themselves too. But yeah, I think that's a much more like a thorough kind of cohesive example of somebody who's able to talk about reality as it is and tell a story about an actual person that you could see, but through like a lens of a that's like toying around with the eye, like the medium of it, I guess, in the way that you tell it in such a way it sparks like a new meaning onto it. And I think that's something that I wish I saw more with Sally Rooney or Hannah Yernagura. Sorry, but at this point I'm just so yeah. After that, I read The Jaguar Smile by Salman Rushdie. I'm slowly trying to get my way through him. I kind of had off on a bad start because I read him mainly because of the whole Satanic Verses back in the 80s, right? Late 80s. And that was like the kind of propelled him into fame for kind of wrong reasons as well, because, Fatwa and all that. And yeah, I think that there's a kind of, I was looking at that and I was like reading it with that in mind of like the kind of setting of like, this kind of these satanic extra verses put into the Quran, I guess, that this guy dreams about, and it's very magic realistic kind of way, but it like more so than like Jorges or Marquez or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, actually, to the point where it's like it was so hard for me to make heads or tails of it, and I kind of like almost gave up mentally partway through, and I kind of kept reading it, but and finished it, but I just kind of feel bad I got off on the wrong foot with Salman Rushdie, but I really liked his this one, maybe not just because it was a nonfiction account of the Salvador, I think, who's in Salvador. Kind of similar to what Joan Didion did in El Salvador, going in person to see the place, but kind of having a journalistic kind of instinct behind it of, writing about visiting this. I don't know if it was Salvador. It was somewhere in Panama. I think it was Panama. I think to kind of observe the turmoil and kind of just ask questions and yeah. I thought it was interesting. But yeah, I did read I think one other of his books this year. Sputnik Sweetheart. So, okay, this is August. Okay, so Sputnik Sweetheart, Haruki Murakami. I feel bad that I'm not as thoroughly through his works as there's another Murakami, so he's still out. The latest one he did was not first person singular, I think. That came out 2021, I think. But I think I read a little while after it came out, excuse me. But I think, yeah, I feel bad that maybe I should take my time, I guess. I don't want to rush things with Murakami. I think he's like, he's one of my favorite writers. I think he's definitely in the top 5, maybe, writers of all time. And if that was Billy Budd, Herman Melville, another classic. Definitely nautical themed, just like Bernito Salvino, or Chirino. But yeah, I did a review. I actually did a review on that. So yeah, The Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. Talking about faith. I think I did a review on this too. It's talking about his almost kind of an autobiographical account, maybe a kind of heavily romanticized version of it, maybe, where he took kind of creative liberty of this character who's kind of a high-ranking, not quite a dandy, but definitely like kind of high-ranking military officer of a count, maybe of the variety of that, Count Tolstoy was. His family was like very rich, and he's coming from this place of severe privilege and like luck, just like moral and like and financial luck, and now he's being after he's exploded basically a servant girl and kind of seduced and had her child and then abandoned her, who left her kind of to the wolves, and she's like basically to the point where she's like in horrible poverty. He has a kind of a change of heart, a literally change of heart, like he has a repentance kind of way of he repents and to Jesus, to Christ, and has an Orthodox Russian, I think, priest, baptize him. I can't remember all the details, but he spends a lot of time in jail, kind of making up for his impenitence in a way. There's more to rather than just the aspect of repentance, of like quiet repentance, and as sincere as that may be, there's the next act of the kind of the kingdom of, which is why he's like, one of the things is like, the kingdom of God is within you, I think. I haven't read it yet, but it's nonfiction by Tolstoy. But I think that's him talking about how the next step of it is an actual taking action, practical way of sustaining your faith, not just by kind of, a quiet prayer, but actually living out your repentance, I think, is what Tolstoy kind of has in his anarcho kind of, what is it called? Anarcho Christianity, I believe. Yeah. And that's probably one of my favorites of Tolstoy, next to Anna Karenina and The Death of Ivan Ilyich. So, Grand Union by Zadie Smith, another Zadie Smith, slowly working my way. Thought it was a nice, pleasant little story. Discourse on Human Nature by David Hume. Yeah, I figured I'd give him a shot, because I actually hadn't read him before I read of him. Like the whole ought is, I think I mentioned him already in this thing, or at least, at least obliquely, through, but yeah, Mortality, Christopher Hitchens. I just figured I'd give him, I thought I was writing him off a little bit too much, but I was trying to slowly get into stuff like him and his autobiography. I just have to take it with small doses, just because Hitchens can be like so unabashedly Hitchens that it's just hard to kind of, for me at least, to kind of take that much kind of a dry, sarcastic kind of irony, and wit too. so almost to the point of sophistry, I think. But Alex O'Connor did a really good thing on that. Kind of saying his praise of Hitchens, but also trying to point out the leaven out, I guess, and address the other aspect of kind of almost purposeful at times, like playing the fool of like saying like, oh well, like the Socratic daemon, or appealing to certain things and just being like, like without having an actual kind of moral. Him getting his morals, he's like, well, of course atheists can be moral, but he's also kind of arguing, kind of like he's like writing off. He's kind of like highly dismissive of like the apologist or whatever, like Doug Wilson, I think his name was, the review he did with him, or the interviews he did with him, but debates rather, actually. So and Frank Turek too. I think Frank Turek, as much as he can be really kind of hard-headed, kind of really just kind of black and white kind of arguing. Ben Shapiro kind of almost at points, but I think he did kind of argue from a point of like purposefully, almost like facetious sophistry in the debate. So yeah, after that I read Nin by Vladimir Nabokov. I love that one. It was like a little bit hard to get through, despite it only being a couple hundred pages. I just thought like it trying to, for me too, some of Nabokov's, and it's brilliant, but like it's also like almost like a what's the word? Almost like a menagerie of like different words and syllables and playing off each other in a very interestingly witty, and it's like him like reading Nabokov at that period, at least in the in the 40s, and with Lolita as well, or I haven't yet to have read Speak Fire yet, I don't know, but I did have it on my wish list. But yeah, he's like, it's like navigating like a landscape of like, it's like you're trammeling through it, like you're almost like at some points you have to rock climb with Nabokov and fight with his, to like fight his prose, like and other times because he's a maximalist kind of thing, but the setting itself is minimalist pretty, so I think it's pretty interesting to kind of have those two colliding, whereas like somebody like maybe Pynchon, who actually was he was highly not only influenced but also taught. He was lucky enough to get taught English in English, obviously not in Russian, at one of the, I think it was on Harvard or somewhere kind of Harvard, near Harvard, literature. I think like a creative fiction, I think, course by Nabokov himself. So it's pretty lucky. But you can hear even in Pynchon's kind of like like flamboyant kind of way of, it's like still its own kind of maximalist kind of jargon, and so yeah, but still a fan. And then Breast and Eggs by Miyako Komi, that's the second one of hers, and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, a classic, Heathcliff, Cathy, obviously. Intermissions by Zadie Smith. That was kind of a recent one, semi-recent. He was talking about like her kind of a essayist kind of form of COVID, I believe. So it was like pretty, maybe, I don't know, Jesus, it's almost 5 years since COVID hit. So yeah, I guess that was a while ago. Autumn by Ali Smith. The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. I heard good stuff. It's a good kind of mystery, kind of thriller, kind of detective fiction. I just thought, classic kind of one of the most famous kind of, if you look up literally the first thing of detective fiction, you're going to find Agatha Christie. A Man Without a Country by Kurt Vonnegut. Slowly also trying to work my way through him. I think next is Player Piano, I think. The Shawl by Cynthia Ozick, one of my favorite short stories, pretty much of all time. I just have to say that it was so great. Kept me on my feet. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Ken Casey. I feel bad because I think that might have been the abridged version, so it was like, it's almost kind of a novella length, but I will definitely try to get to the full thing, some of the pretty soon. The Elements of Style Ken Casey also was one of the merry pranksters of his day. He died probably the early 2000s, so he was lived throughout. Like he was like kind of vaguely associated with the Beats, and that's where Thomas Wolfe comes in with the electric Kool-Aid acid test. Asking questions and on the road with him. So that was pretty interesting. Interesting personality. The Elements of Style because he actually worked at he actually worked at a in kind of a asylum area. I think a mental ward, I think. So he was like kind of closely associated with people who would be kind of far gone, I guess, mentally. So so you see that kind of a lot of that reflected in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it's obviously in one of my favorite films as